Yeah, I feel like the world would be so much more interesting if, like, instead of waiting till somebody's house to like shoot them at like 2 o'clock in the morning, first
Just knock on the door.
you just knock on the door. It's like we're fighting now.
Yeah, your
Like,
living
just-
room.
just
We'll
fist
decide
fighting.
who owns this place.
This is my house now.
Martial arts would become like a necessity then.
Yeah.
So
If the basic world would basically be like either like Dragon Ball Z or I don't know,
Avatar.
what's Avatar.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think when the last domestic example of this would have been. I mean, certainly in the 1800s, that would have been commonplace because I mean, you had the sandbar fight, which is what made Jim Bowie famous. Jim Bowie, inventor of the Bowie knife. It's called the sandbar fight because dueling was illegal, so they met on an island in the middle of the Mississippi River. I forget who the principal combatants were, but he was one of the seconds and almost cut a guy in half with his knife.
Oh my god. Wow.
Well, in the 60s, Bruce Lee, it happened to Bruce Lee several times. Because
He got
once he got
challenged.
popular, people would come to that school and say, "You don't know anything. You're a fraud." And
Yeah.
especially the karate people, because they're getting pissed.
Yeah.
Kung Fu was growing.
I think that school challenges were still happening in the early to mid 1900s.
Yeah.
I think that whenever we got to like the 80s and 90s was whenever it started to fall out.
Yeah, because didn't he make a movie that was sort of based on? But he actually went on. A
Well, I mean, if
He
you want to
went-
say a Chinese connection,
But I mean, he went on a legit rampage though. But I mean,
he was going on a murder spree.
He was on a murder spree. But I mean, they kind of like they did start it, and the whole movie they were trying to like catch him, and it was pretty much like Rambo. I was like, leave the guy alone, but they kept poking a bear, and in Bruce Lee's case, the bear had a shotgun. So
yeah. That was a good movie.
I plan for my legendary fight to be during a thunderstorm. So
Our fight will be legendary.
it really
Bruce Lee was
was.
getting challenged in San Francisco and again in Seattle. It never stopped. When he moved to Seattle, they started
Yeah.
it. So even after Jeet Kune Do came out, Chinese Kung Fu philosophy, the first book that he put out, they were coming. Where is he? Like still doing it back then, and that was the '60s.
Yeah.
I'm pretty
They
sure
were
they
still
still
fighting
do it.
people.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure they still do stuff like that.
It's
And, like-
it's very rare because it's all martial arts has become so it's just a big business nowadays with most stuff.
It definitely
So-
seems like it's like mellowed out some. I mean, they put on theatrics like when you have like these two boxers going head to head. But I mean, like
There's still huge divides in martial arts.
such
So,
as
well, I mean, like in the 90s to early 2000s, UFC created like the biggest divide I think for our
I
country since like before Bruce Lee.
It heavily commercialized it. It was already going that way, but they like put it on steroids. And
That's
now it's
weird
like
how that
everything
happened.
is defined style because of UFC.
that's so weird how that happened. Like,
But it
then they
also
started
ended up
looking down
making
on
it so-
smaller martial arts.
It also started to promote the mixing the styles a lot, actually, because I mean Bruce Lee was starting to promote that, but UFC ended up accelerating that. But I think the big thing that it did was that it ended up pushing all the traditional systems to the wayside.
Yes, and what I don't like about UFC is they push the philosophy like it doesn't matter, so it's all gone. So all
Yeah.
the thought and all of these things, those fighters are not in the gym thinking about that anymore. They're drinking high protein steroids, banging on the mat. They're not thinking about why they're doing this in the first place.
There's no discipline.
There's no discipline.
Yeah.
Like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu isn't rooted in a story. It's rooted in an art of combat, right? Let's all get together and fight. Let's do it this way.
I'm sure it wasn't originally.
It
though.
wasn't. But
Yeah.
but
But
today
now it
to
is.
find it, it's like,
Yeah.
where did this history... Like, one thing Bruce Lee did is he goes, all these styles are crap. I'm going to throw them out. Only you keep what works. But I'm going to tell you about them before
Right.
I do that, right?
He
It's
taught
an
a
amazing way to do
big
it.
philosophy
Yes.
person whenever it came to martial arts. Yeah. So
He didn't throw it out completely. He said, all these stories are really good, but if you're going to fight, here's what you need. That's a much better way to do it.
yeah, I always understood it as the techniques that he would actually teach was mainly like it was just basics, and then he taught philosophy with the basics, and then said once you understand all these philosophies. And you have the basics, you can go out and learn other things,
He balanced it out. He had
Yeah.
he's like this philosophy and the lessons behind it is not irrelevant, but here's what you need in a fight,
Yeah.
in like a legit fight.
But
If you look at Jeet Kune Do logo, it's yin and yang with the arrows. because it's balance and then always moving both ways.
Yeah, but and you see that yin, you see that symbol in like every single martial arts like academy and school, but then you get to the school, it's like there's no black and white, it's just black.
Yeah.
There's no white there's no white dot there. It's just all black.
It's my way or the highway.
And then they look down on the traditional systems. I was like, that's like cussing your mother out. I was like, if it wasn't for this, you would not have this.
Right. And all the techniques that they have, I mean, they came from traditional
Yeah,
styles.
it's all evolved.
They just picked and chose the techniques that they wanted to use for ring fighting.
And the ones that look good.
Yeah. Well, so traditional martial arts, whenever you have like more complete systems like the kung fu systems, the karate systems, and taekwondo systems and things like that they're like really complete systems. You can get all the different types of techniques, locks, throws, striking, all the different types of stances and maneuvers and weapons, and so you have a complete system. Then you have like the individual systems like that are more like specialized, like boxing or Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu or Aikido or Judo, because I would say they're pulling from those systems a lot more for the mixed martial arts at this point. But all those systems they took from the main primary systems like karate and taekwondo and kung fu, and then you can get really good with those techniques whenever you practice those systems very quickly. But then you're missing out on all the other stuff. So if you have just one person that comes around and has a way to counter, boxing by kicking you in the leg or something, you're kind of screwed. What do you do? So
remember early UFC, you could see that happen.
Oh, yeah.
If someone was just a boxer, you see it immediately. You have no ability to win. You're done.
Yeah, it
was really fun
over.
to watch when it was like matched up that way.
It was amazing, yeah, because
it showed how people were rigid though, right? Like so I was karate, that's all I am. Right?
Yeah.
So now I'm facing someone that's like Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and they tackle me on the ground. Like, what do I do now?
Yeah.
My school didn't teach me what to do now.
Yeah, they were very specific styles,
Yeah.
and I remember that actually the Tiger Kung Fu guy though he actually did pretty good for what he was doing, and it was great, but then you had Hoist Gracie come in, and of course because he won the first 5 UFCs, people said Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is the best, but it's like no, it's because thousands of years ago, even from what I understand, Shaolin Kung Fu actually did have ground fighting in it thousands of years ago, but they threw it out over time because it was just like, well, we never use this in actual fights, and it's way more than we actually need, so they just kind of started drifting away from it. And it's like, well, nobody practices it, so nobody knows how to protect against it.
Right.
So now everyone has gone out and practiced Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it's only taken us like 10 or 20 years to really get enough to be able to defend against it again, so it didn't have a very long reign, which shows to me it's not the greatest style. Even boxing had a longer reign than Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu did,
Right.
because boxing was like late 1800s was whenever it was starting to come
The
around.
American
Back when they-
style,
back when they
Chinese
fought like
boxing
this.
was almost from the
Right.
beginning.
But
That's when it was
Chinese
brought up.
boxing was different though.
Kicking.
Yeah, you used
And the
But-
ground fighting left the Shaolin Temple with the Japanese invasion of Manchuria because they had guns. That's why they stopped. They were like, once it goes to the ground, you're going to get bayoneted, because they studied the Japanese bayonet and how long it was. It was twice as long as any bayonet that had been an invading army. And so that's what came from the palms and the hidden palms.
Yeah.
Is they would absorb the bayonet strike and then disarm. So a little bit of Aikido, but everything was, once you go to the ground, Japanese would just bayonet you, because the first people who surrendered learned the hard way that the Japanese weren't interested in your surrender; they were going to stab you and kill you. So that's where the ground fighting was eliminated completely, and they didn't practice it anymore.
Yeah.
Well, are you training for war, or are you training for sport combat? I mean,
Yeah.
one of the advantages for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu is they can go as close to 100% as you can go without killing each other. versus
True.
something like Taekwondo, where if you actually no pads on kick someone in the head as hard as you can, they're not fighting for a couple of months because they've suffered a concussion, and so there may be a practical advantage to a martial art where you can go 95% versus one where, hey, 75% is about as fast as you can go, and we're going to have to wear pads, which are going to slow you down and change the way you move and change your vision.
Right. That is one of the nice things. I mean, like, I did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu for like a year or two, and it was a great, fun style to practice. But I got just enough to be able to, get someone that practices Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu off of me, so I can get back to my feet where I'm comfortable. And so it's not. I always like to think of it as a supplementary system, because same thing with like Aikido and Judo and boxing and things, because they're great styles to go and practice, to learn how to specialize in those systems and learn their foundations and stuff, because like knowing the way the boxers end up throwing punches, you're not going to learn from any other martial art like a better way to punch. A lot of times you can get other techniques to add on to it, to make it even better though, so it's the same thing with Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and Aikido and Judo. Like you can take what that you learn from those systems and then kind of make it better and have a whole system, be able to protect yourself against everything. But when you're whenever you're trying to practice a full system, one of the biggest problems I think is that all those like supplementary systems I was saying, you can go and practice them for a couple years and be proficient in them enough to be able to use them, because you're practicing like a specific set of techniques. For full systems, you really you're not really going to be able to use it very well for a while unless you're like training really, really hard to do it, so, or you're not going to be very good in a lot of the techniques, because you have such a huge variety. So if you're somebody that actually has that experience, like you feel like you're practicing the traditional system and you're not excelling in anything, I would say biggest recommendation is to pick certain techniques that you like and practice those ones because they're what you naturally kind of attuned to. So like one of my favorite things whenever I was like a teenager was actually shin kicks. I loved to do shin kicks, and I got really good at doing shin
I have a
kicks.
giant bruise on my knee from you.
Yeah,
I can verify that he's telling the truth. It's like this big.
I was like, well, you actually gave me a big bruise on my
So
shin
now we're
too.
even.
So